Okay, today we're here for tags, likes, and follows, connecting with survivors on social media. And these will be our learning points today. I'm going to just read those real quick. Develop an understanding of social media and how it affects survivors. Evaluate your organization's capacity in your current presence and goals for social media. Learn fundamental ways to use social media to connect with survivors and identify considerations and policies to adapt for organizational social media use. So excited. Power and purpose. What is social media? Should programs have social media? And how does social media impact survivors? So we're going to get started today by diving into what is social media and some of the basics of how it functions. We're going to go over statistics about who uses social media and how they use it, and some of the information may surprise you. So Lachey had pointed out we're going to have some interactive stuff. We're going to get ready to get started with our Mentimeter. So if you have a phone, you can scan this QR code. If you prefer to go to the menti.com, you can do that as well. Kelly Marie put the link in the chat, and you can enter this code.
We're going to give everyone a second before I switch over my screen, but you should already be able to access the Menti if you are on your phone.
And if you're having trouble, feel free to reach out to KAM and she can help you.
Okay, so everyone should be seeing the Mentimeter now. Can everyone see it? Okay, I see Keisha nodding. So our first question for you all today is, what comes to mind when you think of social media? And so this is a word cloud, so you can type in one word, and the more people say a certain word, the more it will pop up.
And if any of you were with us yesterday, we did a training about how to use Mentimeter and how to use QR codes. So you get to see that live and in action today.
So far, you've got Facebook, influencer, and drama. Okay. What else? So you can, for this word cloud, you can put your answers you can put in many answers if you want. So if you're thinking of multiple things, go ahead and do another submission.
Lachey, you're muted.
Thanks. Connecting with people. Yeah, so thank you all for these answers. I think I resonate with a lot of what you all said. So we got picked a couple times, but some of the names of some of the platforms, and quick. Yeah, I think that also resonates when I think about social media as well. So our next slide is a couple of scale questions. So we have agree and disagree, and then we have a couple of statements. So you can move the indicator on whether you strongly agree with the statement or you strongly disagree. So the first one is, I feel comfortable using social media at my program. Do you agree or disagree with that statement? I know the goal and strategy for my program social media. I know the policies and procedures of managing my organization's social media. Social media as a whole has improved the lives of survivors. So what do you think about those statements? And Keisha, feel free to jump in anytime. Sorry, took this over. But yeah, so it looks like we feel moderately comfortable using social media in our programs, right? We got a 5 out of 10 for that one as our average. Pretty confident in the goal and knowing the goals and strategies for our program social media. We like to see that. We feel again moderately comfortable with the policies and procedures of managing your organization's social media, but we don't really feel like social media has improved the lives of survivors. And I think that's really interesting. And then our last question. We really want to make sure that when we're talking about some of the things that we have planned, we get to those points, but answering what concerns you all today. What are your concerns about social media and connecting with survivors? What What keeps you up at night? What are some things you try to avoid? What blunders do you want to try to not do so you have to make an apology video online? What are some of the things you're concerned about?
Confidentiality, absolutely. Perps finding victims or stalking them. We got people looking to connect with kids, moderating the comments. Those are good concerns you're listing. Negative responses or comments. Any others? Not true information being spread. People reaching out for support when we're not working, like the overnights or weekends. Yep. Problematic engagement or trolling. Sounds like there's been some experiences potentially, or just maybe some concerns. Maybe you haven't had the experience, but those are really good.
Yeah, so we're gonna cover and talk about a lot of these things today. And I just want to preface this that a lot of the things that we're going to talk about are suggestions. We are not telling you all exactly what to do because all of your organizations are different. You have different policies and procedures, and you have different goals for your social media. So we're going to make suggestions, but ultimately it's up to the people who are managing your social media accounts and your leadership to decide what's the best policies and protocols for your organizations. So we're going to give you some samples and things to consider, but as always, that decision is always up to you. And someone said sharing names of possible perps or victims. Absolutely right. So if we're going to talk about how our ethical obligations to protect survivors' privacy is one of the things to be concerned about for connecting with them online. Okay, so Does everyone see the slideshow back up?
Yes, we are good.
Okay, just want to make sure. Thank you, and thank you to those who responded. Okay. So let's just make sure that we all have the same amount of base information when we're starting, right? When we say social media, what are we even talking about? We define social media and really the internet, right? People who know more than us and do this for their jobs define social media as websites and applications that enable users to create and share content to participate in social networking. So usually the base features of these sites are free, and so they're available and accessible to a lot of people, though some features might come at a cost. And so the reason we're talking about social media as a way to connect with survivors in our anti-violence programming is because people are literally on social media all the time, right? They're using it to find jobs, to find recipes, to watch TV, to connect to people they care about, see new music, answer questions. Social media has become ingrained in the lives of many in our communities. And I know some of you probably on this webinar today are also probably using social media. The research says that 73% of all Americans use some form of social media actively, right? And so if you can get 73% of all folks in the United States to do anything, that is an effective strategy. Globally, that number comes in at 68% of adults use social media. So we are a little bit higher than the average. When it comes to social media used by adults and teens in the US, teens use social media at a higher rate than adults. So 93% of teens in the US use social media for a shorter amount of time. In Iowa, particularly, 96% of adults use some form of social media. So let's put into perspective, right? If we know that 73% of people in the US are on social media, and we know that someone in the United States experiences sexual assault every 68 seconds, that's what the latest statistic says, then statistically, there means that there are a lot of survivors using social media that we can provide services to. Even if we opt out of using social media in our personal lives, which that's your choice, right? Social media is a place in a virtual space where advocates can connect to survivors. And if survivors are there, then our program should be there too. Another reason we should consider utilizing social media is because it's a tool that can increase our impact and direct support to survivors. So, like all tools, right, it can be used to harm and specifically be used as a tool to perpetrate sexual harm. Non-contact sexual violence, especially, is prevalent across social media as a part of something all age groups engage in, but specifically, it impacts teens and young adults. And because of that broad anonymity or broad ability to be on social media without revealing information about yourself, large platforms and lack of recourse offered for survivors, many people feel emboldened to harass, verbally attack, and do sexual harm on social media. So when we asked you all earlier about what some of the concerns were, some of you all said, right, people being able to stalk survivors, people trolling or posting things online to harass other people, right? And we know that happens on social media a lot, right? Also, we know that some people view non-contact sexual violence, like online harassment, as quote unquote less serious than sexual assault, but that's untrue. We know that all sexual violence is violent, causes pain and trauma in the lives of survivors, and affects our communities. Just like this wrench or the screwdriver can be used to hurt someone, social media can also be used to help people, and it can bring healing in the lives of survivors. Social media can also be used to connect survivors with resources, to share information and events, to find community despite distances. So especially, again, I'm the rural TA coordinator, so I have to talk about rural experiences, especially for survivors who feel isolated geographically. social media is a way for them to connect to services, even when they're not able to get there by public transportation or having their own way to get around, right? So social media is still a way for them to be in space with people and never have to leave their home. It's a way for survivors to share their stories, a way to respond to victim blaming and rape myths that we might see, and to provide validation to survivors who might need it. With great power and influence comes that great responsibility, right? How are we going to use social media? But by using social media effectively and uplifting people, we can demonstrate the benefits to survivors and to our communities. Another benefit for social media and another way to connect to survivors is because we can share that information in real time. So let's say, for example, we are working at our organization, the Sexual Violence Community Center, right? That's what we're just going to call it for this webinar. And something happens like our air conditioning breaks down or a national disaster happens, right? In this case, on the flyer, we talked about a tornado, right? But instead of trying to call everyone on our network one by one and hoping that they answer or hoping that they respond to our texts, right? We can instead create a post on social media and share that out with our community partners, right? That way, people who are connected with us on social media can know what's changing as it happens. If we're utilizing other things like hashtags or sharing or live streaming, right? And we'll talk about what some of those things are a little bit later. Our posts can reach farther and more people will be informed, saving us both time and energy. We also just want to caveat all this with that's not going to replace word of mouth. So I have done needs assessments for sexual violence services in rural communities, and still consistently the most popular way to share information in rural communities is word of mouth, right? So we're not saying replace social media altogether with the other types of outreach that you use, but social media can help spread that word quicker. And instead of only informing 1 to 10 people, we can be informing thousands of people at the same time. We especially encourage folks to use social media if that change is temporary, right? So we might, if the tornado, for example, damaged our main office, right? We might put that post up on our story, which is usually a 24-hour temporary post that can be taken down once that information is no longer relevant really easily, right? And so we don't have to think about it that much. Another major source that social media is used for today is fundraising. And I want to acknowledge that many survivors have unfortunately had to use social media fundraisers to get their needs met. We're not going to really focus on fundraising too much today because our focus for this webinar is on how to connect with survivors. And we aren't really focusing on how to get them to donate funds to us, right? We're focusing on how to connect them to support and resources. So now we're also going to watch a video that kind of talks more about the power of social media. And hopefully some of you are familiar with the person who's in the video.
So if you want all natural pits that don't smell like the pits, get your wild deodorant today at wearerewild.com.
When you go through something as traumatic as sexual violence, there's a way that you close up. Your protection, the way you protect yourself, it's like you're shrouded in shame. And the disclosure, not just disclosure, but then the subsequent having somebody else connect with you and say, you're not alone in that. It just frees you. It frees you from the shame. You don't have to give the details because the details really don't matter. If somebody is bold and stands up and tells their story and you're not ready to do that, and that's not where you are in your journey, to just simply say, me too, is powerful, but it's soft. Me too can be a conversation starter or it can be the whole conversation.
Okay, Keisha, what did you think about that video?
Yeah, like how powerful is that? Like you experience something very traumatic in your life and 2 words, and someone can connect with you. Like, we all want to be validated and feel supported in all that we do. And so that's what that reminded me of. Like, I said 2 words and it just was understood. Like, you didn't have to go into detail and a full disclosure, but you knew exactly what I meant when I said those words. So like, that's super powerful. And so amazing that something like social media created that community.
Thanks for that, Keisha. Yeah, so that the person that was on the video was Tarana Burke. So she originally started the Me Too campaign on MySpace, right? And it's just we've gone through so much change even in the course of the past 2 decades, right? Regarding social media, right? So MySpace was a huge platform and now it is now defunct, right? But that's where the Me Too campaign first started. And then in 2017, Melissa Milano tweeted, "If you've been sexually harassed or assaulted, write Me Too" as a response to this tweet. And then millions of people did, right? So this is just an example of another reason we should be using social media, is because it can be used as a tool for connection and activate others, gather for change. Because of Tarana Burke and then Melissa Milano, right? Because of Me Too, laws were changed. People felt more comfortable disclosing. Some folks felt more comfortable disclosing, and some of those who perpetrated sexual violence were removed from powerful positions after decades of doing sexual harm. So this is what the tweet, right? A tweet sparked national organizations, created funds, and changed the course of history. We also want to remember that for survivors, social media has an impact. So particularly for the Me Too movement, like Keisha was saying, for the first time, folks who didn't know each other were connected by a shared experience that many hadn't discussed before, let alone talked about on social media. It helped them feel like not only were there people who understood their experience, but they had also experienced something similar. Even if they didn't share all the details like Keisha and Tarana said, they could do the quiet thing, like that post, and just share, right? They don't even have to post it, just the acknowledgement that they see what has been shared. And we know being seen and heard in our pain is often the first step of healing for some survivors. So we have to keep in mind, and we'll talk about this a little bit more later, that 50% of people say that the number one reason why they use social media is to connect with their friends and their family. Connection not only drives us to seek support, but it also drives people online too, across distances, illnesses, and time constraints.
All right, so next up, we're going to have our demographic information. So this is going to help us determine which social media platforms we will use. It's going to vary amongst backgrounds, cultures, community, and how people choose to connect. So that's all different. So the platform or platforms that's going to be best for your community, so who you are targeting, that's going to be different from other people attending the webinar with you. And we are going to kind of do some Jeopardy social media knowledge, and we're going to do a poll. Do you see the poll on your screen? So we want to know, which social media platform do you think is the most popular? We'll give you some time. If you can't see the poll on your screen, you can put your answers in the chat as well. Okay. I think we've got most everyone. And you kind of are even between Facebook and TikTok is what I'll share those results. Okay, just kidding. Let's close that. And so, but actually, I don't know why that's doing this. Hold on. There we go. Oh, Well,
I think we were both clicking at the same time, so hold on.
okay.
There we go. Okay, so you should see the results now. Sorry.
And the group has said evenly, like there's a tie between Facebook and TikTok, which I could see that. Do you want to close that out? So actually, YouTube is the most used social media platform, which is followed by Facebook, then Instagram, and then TikTok. I was actually shocked by that because I personally am a TikTok fan, and I think it's because I can just scroll for hours, right? And YouTube feels like I have to be intentional, like I want to learn something and sit down, but YouTube is actually the most popular. And then after that, usage kind of it just differs, as you can see on this screen. But globally, WhatsApp comes in at number 2 behind Facebook. So for youth between ages 12 and 18, the top 3 were YouTube, TikTok, and Snapchat, respectively. Snapchat just started doing that, but we'll get there. So that's just really interesting. What do you all think about like what is taking the top social media platform stance? It's weird that I don't see YouTube. Right. I don't see YouTube as social media either. I feel like that's an educational platform, right? But actually not. And I think about all the chaos we had regarding TikTok when we didn't know if it was going to be here or not. A lot of people moved right back to YouTube. Like that's where they started and then they kind of branched out and then they went back. But yeah, a lot of people are like, YouTube is not social media. What is it? What's the difference? Like what for you makes it feel different? And you can keep us going in the chat there.
Absolutely right. And so I wanted to make sure that that this whole webinar wasn't just based on like what we think or like Keisha and I's opinion, right? I wanted to base a lot of this also in fact, perspective, and experience as well. So when I started doing research, it kept coming up. YouTube kept being mentioned, and I was like, I don't think of YouTube as a social media platform. But when you think about that definition that we use, it qualifies. And in the original first way that YouTube was purposed, it was for people to connect using videos, right? And so you'll even see later on in the presentation, I kind of make the differential for reasons about how the platforms are advertised and their purposes as well. And someone said educational, I completely agree, right? And I think especially in our field in the anti-violence movement, usually we use the YouTube as like an educational platform to educate and engage in that way.
Yeah. So if we know that people are using social media, then yep. Just kidding. Moving ahead of myself here, friends. Then that's just essentially where we want to be. We want to be meeting survivors where they are. Yeah. Hold on, friends. All right. So in Iowa, the demographics look a little different. So this is what is specific to our state. 87% of adult Iowans use some type of social media, with YouTube still being the most popular. Now, Facebook still reigns as the post base, so like where you post some information and like quick response kind of things, social media account. But then Snapchat comes in at number 3 and probably influenced by the number of youth that are on college campuses in the state. And then Kelly Marie dropped in the chat a social media resource that you can use to get more unique usage about social media. So check that out.
So we've been talking about social media, right? We know which ones are the most popular. We know like who is using it, who's using it in Iowa. Really, why do people use social media, right? What drives people and theoretically survivors, which is what we're focusing on today, to be online? Quite simply, right? It's to be in touch about what's going on. So the number one reason identified, like I said before, by people 16 and older, said that keeping up with friends and family is the reason that they get on social media. So that's 1 in 2 people. The most important thing that they're seeking out with over an hour of their free time every day is connection. After that, it's filling up their spare time, reading news stories, finding content, and seeing what's being talked about. So by age group, these things vary. So for younger folks, it goes keeping up with friends and family, filling up time, and finding content. And then by the other age groups, these top 5 move around. But consistently, these are what people are saying. So if we know why people are using social media, and some of those people are survivors, then it's up to our organization to also meet that need. We can do so by having thoughtful and engaging content. There's all of our contexts, right? We just wanted to say, like, before we get started, these are the most popular. Think about how you use them. These are the numbers. But what are kind of the purpose and primary function of all of these platforms? We're not going to talk about all the social media platforms today. Even doing research for this webinar, I found out about new social media platforms that I had never heard of that still get some type of engagement, right? And yeah, like someone said, it connects with people, right? That is a main way and why people get online and particularly use social media. But we're going to focus on the first, I think it's 6 major platforms that people use, and think about more about who the demographics are and what they're used for. So I already talked about YouTube and how a lot of us don't view that as kind of social media. And that's because unlike the other forms of social media and the most popular ones, YouTube really emphasizes long range video content. And in this case, long range, now because of the other types of social media that exist, means longer than a minute. This is, again, the most popular site, and it's best for sharing and editing videos quickly. It can also do automatic captions and be used to do step-by-step instructional guide. So it's great for people who are observational learners and for people who like to see and hear instructions. You can share videos on YouTube like grounding tips or educational classes. And if this is your focus, you're doing a lot of education, YouTube is probably one of the best platforms to use. We at Iowa CASA, as most of you probably know, use YouTube quite a lot. So all of the CEs that we've done since 2024 have been posted on our YouTube channel because it's easy to edit, it's free, and it's a centralized place to hold all of our long content. We have Facebook. So Facebook is widely used by people across all ages, and it's one of the most established social media platforms. When people think of social media, and we even saw in the Menta meeting that we did earlier, people think automatically of Facebook, right? They have established that as part of their brand. And I forgot to change this when I was making the content for this webinar today, but Facebook has recently made the change to be called Meta, but they still have it available in some places as Facebook. Facebook is considered one of the platforms where you can just quote unquote post and go, right? You could put up a short sentence about how you're feeling and that's it. The post also could be available for a long time, and Facebook is also a place where people can share events, they can do fundraising, they can share images, videos, and text. They can also set up separate groups, so only a select few people can see what is being shared. Facebook also has live streaming and story functions, also continue to gain more popularity. We have Instagram. So Instagram is a photo-based platform, and it's still fairly popular for those 65 and under. It's great for sharing flyers, pictures, and videos, and Instagram was the first platform to have stories, which are temporary posts that are available for 24 hours. So this would be an ideal way to send out event reminders and post updates involving temporary situations like the tornado that we talked about in our first graphic. We have TikTok. This is my personal favorite social media platform. I don't post, but I do spend a lot of time on TikTok. So TikTok is best for short range video content, and that's videos that are a minute or less for most creators. So TikTok was a spinoff of both 2 different other social media platforms, one Vine, Musical.ly, which were again short video and music-based platforms respectively. Now, TikTok generally has a lot younger demographic and recently gained a lot of attention when it was banned in the US for a few days. Its future is still uncertain. It has been a platform that has catapulted many young influencers and been used as a place for education and mobilization due to a sophisticated algorithm, which just means the way that it tracks what you're watching and can connect people with the content that they like more than other platforms. We have Snapchat. So Snapchat is also a photo-based platform where messages quote unquote disappear once opened. Individual users set time limits on messages, and the senders are then informed of screenshots are taken. This app is the most popular for people under the age of 24. And then we have X, formerly known as Twitter. So Twitter consists of a feed of posts with character limits. Twitter connects people utilizing hashtags and campaigns and was a place that helped spark revolutions in past decades. Twitter also needs consistent posts to be relevant, and X's popularity has significantly gone down in recent years after the name switch. So one that we're not going to really focus on today, but I want to make sure that we include is LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is technically a social media platform, but it's more for professional networking. While it didn't make it on our screen, this app can be used to connect survivors with employment and volunteer opportunities, which is something that they might need. So even though we talked about 6 different platforms, right, with different user base and functions, we're not saying that you need to go out today and make a Twitter account and a Facebook account and a TikTok account. We're not telling you all to do that, right? That's going to be really overwhelming. And depending on your target demographic, that's not even going to be relevant for them. The actual best practice for nonprofits is to choose a few key social media platforms to post content on, and then really invest in the ones that you choose. So here are some key questions that we came up with to help you pick platforms that you want to use. So what are the demographics in our community? Who is our target demographic for our services? And what kind of social media platforms do they use? And it's this slide that gives much more context to why we spend so much time at the beginning talking about the demographics and who uses social media, right? The social media that we use and the content that we post should be reflective of the demographics of those in our community, as well as the target demographic of the people that we serve. So for example, if we are targeting men over 45 as our audience, then we might consider using Facebook and YouTube as our main platforms that we use, because these platforms and the data shows that these are the ones that they use the most frequently. If we're trying to target teen girls between the ages of 14 and 17, then we might choose to be on TikTok and YouTube as well as Instagram. And so our next section, we're going to focus on not only what platforms do groups use and how we collectively use social media, but delve into the ways we use social media and how advocates and programs can fill the gaps in the needs for survivors. At the same time, we want to make sure that the platform that we're using is aligned with our program's capacity to update and keep social media current, right? And so we really, really, really want programs to think about how often and what time that they can commit to posting on social media. Whatever is current and the definition of current also is going to depend on what platform and how frequent information is shared. So for example, what is current on YouTube has a lot longer shelf life than what's current on TikTok, Snapchat, and even on Twitter, right? We want to think about what kind of content do we have the capacity to continually manage? Do we have the capacity to make long videos? Can we commit to daily or weekly posts? Or can we commit to short videos multiple times a day, right? If we're like, we can commit to doing one 5-minute video a week, right? that might be best for either Facebook or YouTube. But if we're like, no, we can dedicate to making 1 minute videos 3 to 5 times a week, then it might be worth it to make a TikTok. But again, if we are not going to be able to manage the content, then we should pick a different platform. That's okay. Mm. So someone shared that Snapchat is popular with people who portray sexual violence against children. And I would say that all social media platforms are used for this in some way, right? Some of them have a worse reputation than others because of their target demographic, but all social media is used to harm has been used as a tool to harm children, right? But again, we want to emphasize that social media is the tool, but it's all about the intention of the person using it, right? We can use a wrench to fix a car. We can use a wrench to hurt someone, right? But that's the same thing with social media. And we'll talk about the responsibilities that we have and ways that we can help prevent violence for our own profiles a little bit later. We also wanted to give you all our suggestions for social media platforms that can be best to connect with survivors, right? So these are not our suggestions of ways to outreach with partners, to solicit donations on behalf of your organization, or to catch potential donors' attention. These are our suggestions of ways to connect with support for survivors looking for support on social media. Now, if your organization has a large budget for production or is invested in doing a lot of education around sexual violence, healing, consent, a lot of fact-based information sharing, or even long-range videos, then YouTube might be the platform for you. Again, these videos have a longer shelf life. If you post once a month on YouTube, you're doing a great job, especially for an anti-violence organization. Remember, and we say this because YouTube is the one that has the most people, theoretically, and it's the one that theoretically most survivors are interacting with. It also has a pretty easy editing system, and it also allows free captions that are pretty accurate. And it's something Iwakasa uses. Like I said, we use it to share our own educational videos, as well as other coalitions and other anti-violence organizations. It's also really easy to capture the analytics, again, the demographics of who uses your social media on YouTube. And it's, like I said, it's really easy to figure out who's using your social media and who's watching your content and how often they're doing it. So you may not be able to see the screenshot on the slide today. This is from an organization called Sapria. And this particular video is called Practicing Boundaries, Healing Practices for Survivors of Child Sexual Abuse. And so another cool thing about YouTube is that you have the ability to make playlists. You can house videos under the same topics, and people can just go through the videos and continue to watch, right? So this video is only 5 minutes. When I say short, long range, again, longer than a minute, and it doesn't have to be super fancy. It can just be you and another advocate talking about what it means to be grounded. It can be you and another advocate with permission, sharing quotes from survivors about how a certain issue impacted them. The second suggested platform to use is Facebook, and there we go. Our second suggested platform to use is Facebook and Instagram. And this is because their pace is a little bit slower and they are post-based, right? Their demographics also range a little bit wider across ages, right? So people between 16 and 65 use Facebook and Instagram pretty consistently. Also have about the same abilities, even if Instagram is a little bit more photo and video based. You can like, share, and comment on other accounts. And they also have live streaming features as well and temporary stories. For those of you who may not be familiar with what live streaming is, it's where you can broadcast videos in real time and as it's happening. So you don't have the capacity to edit, which again, could be a liability when we're talking about survivors, but it's a way to show what's happening in real time. For both of these, you can more easily post and make flyers and share information in the captions, and people who are not necessarily following you can still interact with your content. Facebook and Instagram also are a little bit better for that evergreen content. So if you only have the capacity to post once a week or once a month or every 2 weeks, it's a little bit more acceptable on these platforms because people can still go back through their feeds a lot easier without having to scroll through so much content. You also only see things on Facebook and Instagram if depending on your settings. So you can only see posts from people you follow. You can only see posts from the people you follow and who they follow, right? So that can limit the amount of information that you intake. So on the right, we have a post that we created and we posted on our Instagram. And it took us probably around 5 minutes to make this post, right? All we said is, dear survivors, your voice matters. And this can be used over and over again. We can repost it several times a year, right? That can still impact a different audience. And so for survivors who may not want it known that they are interacting with our programs, they're still able to see things that we're posting and potentially still receive the support and connection that they're looking for without ever interacting with us face to face. So at the same time, we want to keep in mind that if we're focusing on youth and youth organizations, we need to be on the platforms they're on. So TikTok, might need to be the platform for Instagram. And these are ones that we've already talked about. Another platform that we hadn't talked about previously is Twitch. So unlike the other ones that we've discussed, Twitch is specifically for people who are streaming themselves playing or engaging with video games. And when we're talking about how to connect with our target demographic, video games is something that youth, even now, more adults are engaging with on a regular basis. So it might be us deciding to play a game or having one of our youth advocates start a Twitch channel and play it for a couple hours, talking a little bit about consent and how it shows up in this game or how it doesn't show up in this game. This is just another way that we can creatively think about how to engage with youth and the way that they engage and with content that they're already interacting with. Even if we're not planning on becoming a Twitch streamer after this webinar today, we want to keep in mind that youth have a shorter attention span, and because it's just the way that their brains are developed. And if we're making content for them, it needs to be short and engaging, but not using a lot of jargon, making sure that we're using bright colors and movement as much as possible in the content, and that it's modern, right? So it's not very academic, but instead using language that youth use to interact with each other. In particular, on platforms like TikTok especially, you have to post very often to be relevant. So if we're trying to engage with youth on social media, we have to make sure that we're consistently posting, if not 4 to 5 times a week, a couple of times a day, at the rate that we need to produce quality content. And when we say quality content, we're not just talking about that you have to create everything that you post and share on social media, but you need to make sure that you're constantly interacting on social media in some way, whether that's creating and posting new content, sharing other people's content, or commenting. You need to be frequently online. Isha, is there anything you want to add since you have previous experience working with youth?
Yeah, I was thinking thinking through social media and how impactful it is for youth. Even if you're doing things and like you make a blooper, like I think when you show up authentically, like, oh, kids can laugh at you. Like you may be making a fool of yourself on social media, but is your message still getting out there? Is it something that they can share and laugh together? And I think about how much influence they have with one another. So if I make a video and I trip and I'm like, oh, you didn't ask consent to touch my leg, whatever the case may be, like, and they think it's funny, like this is going to get passed on. Like, yes, I might look like a fool, but then like, think about the messaging that we're getting out to kids. And like Melissa was saying in the comments, like, yeah, and Lachey had mentioned, like, this is also a space where kids are interacting with each other and not always helpful ways. Like, so if we can get in there and interrupt that or disrupt it and put things in social media like, oh, what do you mean? Did I ask for consent? What does consent mean? Like, oh, there's a resource. Oh, I'm feeling this way. Like, okay, I might not look at it right now, but like later when I'm by myself, I'm going to connect with this, or I'm going to go to that link or that website. So I think there's so much power and influence that social media has with youth in general, but if we get in there and disrupt some of that negative content all the time, or even just provide services, like, do they know you exist? Is there a way that your agency and your organization is out there? Like, if they need it, they know how to contact you. So yeah, I think it's just really, it's so interesting how much influence social media has. I think about like kids that I worked with, they were the kids who had caused the harm. So they got restricted from that, and like the pain and anguish because you aren't using this appropriately. So let's learn how to do this better. Yeah, so get out there. Don't be afraid to try and look foolish. Get a catchy jingle or do something that's different and unique that kids can grab onto and just run with it. So don't be afraid to do that. It'll have great impact.
Okay, so because this is 2 hours and we are invested and the way that we engage with adults as well, we are going to take a 5-minute break. So we're gonna take a break and then we're gonna come back and then start talking about what does it mean to be trending. So come back at 12:05. Thanks, folks.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. So far, we've covered a lot of information. Are there any questions that you have for us about social media, different platforms? And if you don't have them now and they pop up later, that's perfectly fine. So we're going to transition a little bit to trending. Like, what are some ideas of things to post on social media, and what should we keep in mind? All right. Now, before we start posting on social media, I want to remind us that connecting on social media should just be a piece of our agency's outreach and awareness, and part of our agency's strategic plan, not the whole thing. Like, this should not be the end all be all social media, right? What we post, share, like, or comment on is a reflection of what our organization supports, who we are, what we believe in. And so it should all be done as part of a planned strategic guide or plan, right? Or approach. Something that works in line with our fundraising and our services. That strategy should include things like a goal. So for example, we would like to see a 200% increase in referrals from our social media poster accounts. It should include measurable and actionable steps. So we will post on social media 5 times a week. We will make 1 new post a week and evaluate the analytics. Now, it doesn't have to be that specific or that deep. And if analytic review is not what you're ready for at this time, that's okay. But we just want to say, like, the more clear you are with what your goals are with social media, the better everyone involved in connecting with survivors can execute that plan for your agency, right? So you have shorter attention. Just kidding, friends. Here we go. Let me get myself together a little bit. The outreach we should do should also be based on the needs of the people in our community. So beyond just social media, remember, who's that target audience you need to reach? Who are you serving? Like, What's your community for your agency? And we're only going to know what our community needs if we ask them. So needs assessments are great ways to find out like what it is that your community is in need of. And if you need help conducting those, feel free to reach out. Iowa CASA has done some of those in the past, so you can reach out to me directly or not. But going back to the holistic outreach plan, an increased focus on social media doesn't mean that we abandon the other types of social media or other types of outreaches. In a recent needs assessment that Lachey did based on rural advocacy programs, the word of mouth is still the most effective way to spread information. So that means the work we do to maintain and conduct online connections with survivors needs to be balanced with the approaches like word of mouth, print, the newspaper, the newsletters or flyers, your online email blast or your blogs, and then radio and TV, right? Do you all feel like you are balancing social media and like just those the regular, I guess, approaches? How you feel like you're doing? Have you started anything with social media? You don't have to answer those, but just things to consider. Which leads us right to our next point, like just some reflections about developing our strategies. So here are some questions that you can that can help you create an outreach strategy for connecting with survivors. What do we hope to do with our social media? By having this account, what's our goal? So in relation to connecting with survivors, how do we plan to connect with survivors? What are the steps to connecting with them? Who are we posting this content for? And who's our target demographic? And why does our target demographic use social media? So some of those things we talked about in those previous slides, like what's the reason your community is using social media? And what type of content are they looking for? And how are we currently connecting with survivors? So intentionally taking time to think through these things beforehand and strategize around the gaps can save you a lot of time in the long run, because you don't just want to get out there and just be flopping around trying to figure it out. I mean, I guess trial and error works too. Oh, there you go. Thank you. The things we post or share reflect the needs of the survivors in our community. And the only way to know what those specific needs are is to ask them directly. But the data does reveal why people are on social media generally. So if these are the needs, then this is what we should be posting. So if survivors want to stay connected, oh, something just shut off on my computer, but we're going to keep going. Then we want to highlight ways for them to be involved. If survivors want to be entertained, then we need to post things that are geared towards their interests that they find entertaining. If they want to find information, we need to provide information about sexual violence, healing, prevention, consent, that we exist. If they want to find support, can you hear me?
Yes, Keisha, we can hear you.
My computer is turning off and on in this moment.
We can still hear you. Can you hear
Okay,
us?
I can hear you.
Okay.
All the screens are flashing. But if they want to find support, am I still in the meeting?
You are in the meeting.
Okay.
We can still hear you.
Then we need to provide validation and encouragement. And so now we're going to go into some more specific ideas about what to post. But what your organization shares should be based off what the survivors in your community want to see, what they need, and what they want to know more about.
Thanks, Keisha. So another point we want to be cautious about before we post is the overall tone of our content. So traditionally, sexual violence materials, outreach, and pessimistic, altogether dreary, right? So a lot of people with their hands in front of their faces, doing this kind of motion, right? Hiding, ashamed. They're alone. They're in black and white, and they're often like really cowering in a corner. Our materials don't have to be like that, right? It still represent the seriousness of our issue without it being sad. Social media, we want to try a different strategy and sometimes put an optimistic spin on it. We can post and share content that's factual, supportive, encouraging, empathetic, right, and unashamed. So the examples we have on this slide are from the National Sexual Violence Resource Center and their past 2 sexual assault awareness day campaigns. Actually, one is from this year. So Together We Act, Unite, We Change is their campaign for this year, and Building Connected Communities was their campaign from last year. These are both campaigns that they launched for Sexual Violence Awareness Month. You can see that they are very bright, and though they are factual and kind of catchy, these are things that you want from a campaign. Still serious, they're still serious, have a lot of informative materials attached to them. Also, one of the things that you can feel kind of when you look at them is hope. And that's one of the things we want our social media to embody. So Kelly Marie is already on it, I think. And okay. So I think we lost Keisha, and that's okay. I'm gonna carry us to the webinar, but she comes back in, but she'll jump right back in on her part. Okay, folks? Thanks for sticking with us. So Kelly Marie is also going to put another resource in the chat. And for those of you who don't know, right, I'm sure a lot of us do, the 30 Days of Sam is when people share 30 facts for each of the days in April about Sexual Assault Awareness Month, because that is in April. And this year's campaign is Together We Act, United We Change. And the Kelly Marie, like I said, is going to put a link in the chat to this year's campaign, but also you can also find posts and graphics from the previous campaigns that they did, and they have a whole rollout for this, right? So not just graphics, but conversation guides and other ways for you to connect with your community. Awareness Month especially are great ways to get connected to survivors because of the hyper visibility of the outreach that's not normally done by other people in the community. Casa will also be joining in on 30 Days of Sam, so we hope you all join us. Thanks, Kelly Marie. Go over a couple of ways to connect with survivors on social media. So keep in mind that the information we're going to share is going to be pretty general. So adapt these ideas for what we're in your community. The first idea of things that you all can post can just be or share is information, right? So we already saw the video from Supriya. That is a form of information. But this can be things like stats. But it can also, because stats also help combat misinformation. Anything that can help survivors feel empowered, supported, and informed is what we should be sharing. Some ideas are sharing things about consent, sharing things about healing, sharing things about grounding tips, safety planning, staying safe online, the types of services that we offer at our organization, right? So we can say we offer legal services, and then put some of the things that might fall under that category. We offer these types of support groups. They're available at this date, right? Whatever survivors need is what we should be sharing. So the graphic on the screen right now with the green background is a graphic that Casa shared a couple of months ago. The purpose of this post was to provide and share information about trigger planning. Feel free to copy, share, and change this post as you all like. And if you want the direct link to it, we made it on Canva, it's available, email me and I will give it to you all directly. Another content idea is to highlight ways that people in the community can get connected to each other, right? So when we're trying to connect to survivors, we want to highlight ways that they can connect to others as well. Again, connecting with us is what we want, but we want to promote ways that survivors can get connected with other people, and particularly other survivors, their culture and their community, to themselves and feeling safe in their own body, to nature and other living things, but also to resources and other services that they might need. Some place to showcase some of those spaces for survivors to connect with others are different community events, support groups in the community, right? So it doesn't have to be just one that we offer. It can be support groups. It can be AA or NA. what other groups exist for people to seek support. You can be highlighting other volunteer opportunities. So there might be a humane society in your area, right? When they're asking for volunteers, share that post. It can be doing board recruitment or having survivor advisory committees, or it can be in focus group opportunities. So this graphic that we made, again, not a real graphic, right? But we wanted to highlight that we are doing a new drum group, right? Or we've been continuously doing a drum group for weeks and it hasn't gotten much traction in our community. We can do a post, right? It's bright, colorful, as the key point of the thing that we're going to be doing, when it's going to be happening, where it's going to be happening, and contact in the post, right? Again, it took me like 5 minutes to create. Another point we want to consider that when we're trying to bring people together is to think about the places where people are already gathering to get what they need, right? Where are people gathering in our community to get respite, to find direction, to find information, and to receive guidance? So, for example, I chose the drum group because some communities really connect around music making. That's not going to resonate with all communities. We also want to remember that when we're talking about connecting, it doesn't have to be in just physical space, especially for those who want to protect their identity, right? And if we're concerned about survivors' identity or still being COVID conscious, virtual connection spaces might be more ideal. So remember, right, when we're making content or deciding what to post or what we should highlight, the more information we know about our target demographic, including what their interests are, when they're most likely to be online, and what helps them to feel connected, the more impactful our content will be. And always, if the space for them to find connection is our program, that's great. But we don't have to be that space as long as they get connected to the support and healing that they need. So if you attended the webinar on the foundations of sexual violence, you might remember us talking about active listening. Part of active listening is being able to highlight places where survivors have been resilient and resourceful in their lives. Being able to provide encouragement and validation on social media also be helpful in the lives of survivors who really need to hear kind words, be uplifted, and know that someone cares about what they're experiencing or knows what they've experienced. Everyone has a need to be heard and validated in what they've gone through. Even when things might not be going on that we know the specific details of, having someone, especially someone who's supposed to be providing services and seen as a resource, just give you a word of encouragement can sometimes make all the difference in a survivor's day, week, or lifetime. So on the slide is an example of a post that Iowa CASA shared early in their year around the election, because we know moments of big change can be re-traumatizing for some survivors. But here are some other ways that you can encourage survivors, right? You just give general compliments like, wow, your garden looks great, right? Emphasize that trauma changes things, right? It's okay to be angry. Sexual violence impacts your life. That could be a post, right? You can talk about that healing is a journey, right? That's not just a place that you end up. Sayings that resonate within your community, right? So some people that's proverbs, some people that's sharing songs and music. We could validate survivors' decision making, and again, highlight points where they did something that people didn't think they could do, or there was doubt about them being able to do. Something as simple as a "you got this" post could be just the encouragement someone needs to carry on a little bit more. Another way to engage survivors is just to post entertaining or engaging content, right? That serves no other purpose really other than to engage and entertain. And this is a way to show survivors that not only do we just care about the violence that they experience, but we care about them as a whole person, and that includes how they seek joy, right? And it also shows that there can be joy after sexual violence, but there are people that can interact with in a safe and mutual way. Now, this one in particular is going to depend on what brings joy to your target demographic, but honing in on their interests and getting their input is usually a good place to start. People tend to feel more invested when their opinion is taken into consideration and they feel listened to. And this includes people on social media. So, for example, you could do a poll about what to name your new office pet and post that on your social media. Some other ideas are to have a day where you all share pictures of your pets, right? You can do art competitions. You can do polls. You can even take time to do an FAQ about your services that you get and share those answers on social media as well. Example that we use, and again, this is not real, we are not actually doing this, is to do a teal food competition, right? So on April 19th, post a picture of your teal creation and use the hashtag tealfood25. Winner gets a $25 gift card and we will be featured in our May newsletter, right? So a way that really is all the only purpose it's serving is to engage with other survivors and showcase some of their skills. If you're doing some type of competition and can offer a prize, that's even better, right? And it really is about knowing your audience. So maybe your audience is really health conscious. Maybe instead of doing something like the teal food competition, you can hold the 5K and see who can register the largest team. You know what resonates with survivors rest of your community, and that's what we should center our content on. Something else that really resonates with survivors who are wanting to connect is sharing stories. So this is an approach that many survivors connect with, and hearing from other people who have experienced sexual violence. Remember, like when we were talking about Me Too, that's something that was really powerful because survivors were connecting, even if they didn't know each other. Now, with this approach, we want to make sure that we ask survivors if we're going to be sharing something that they said and get their explicit consent before sharing. Also want to be really conscious that this approach might generate disclosures in your comments or wherever you post. And so we want to be prepared for that and have a protocol in place for the people managing our social media that they're aware of. So the quote on this slide is from Miriam Kaba, and she's written a lot about child sexual abuse, healing, and transformative justice. And she herself is a survivor of sexual violence. And we feel comfortable saying this and sharing this information because this is something that she's shared publicly. And if I recall correctly, this quote comes from a book she wrote, right? So this information is readily available. This quote in particular can spark a conversation and encourage survivors, which can help them connect more throughout their lives. Here's some other ideas you can try. So quotes, that's one we're reading today. You could share video clips. So one of a really powerful one I've seen is the video from 1 in 6, and it's where women are reading the stories of survivors, and they said, like, what would you want to say to this person if you saw them? And they're like, oh, I just want to give her a hug. I just want to, you were just a little girl, like you couldn't have done anything. And the people who walk out in response to and wrote the letters were men, right? So that was really powerful and impactful to me. And the first time I saw that was in a training, but it was taken from their social media, right? And so that was impactful. You could do live streaming interviews or podcasts, and this is just the version where you record the live stream, talking about people's experiences, right? You could do book clubs. So this is a way to share survivor story in more of a long form, right? So for example, Chanel Miller has a memoir called Know My Name. She's a survivor. And we could have a book club that with other survivors talking about her experience, how it's impacts us, what we think, what we need. And that, again, could be a way that survivors are still able to connect with each other, with you, and see how other people have navigated their experiences. Okay. The last major category of content ideas is to elevate requests for support. Now, our suggestion, right, as an organization, to boost requests for support from organizations that we trust, or if it's a general need in the community, supplies or resources. For boosting fundraisers, individuals or someone we don't know, we could encounter risk for collecting money online. And so I just want us really to be aware of that and make sure that if that's the risk that we want to take, everyone is aware of some of the liability. So example, right? We made this post, and this is kind of the inverted colors of the one we shared earlier about the tornado, right? So if we start accepting supplies at our outreach office, we can become a physical space for connection, a place where people can get resources. And if they happen to talk to an advocate about the other services we offer, whether they're getting supplies, that makes it even better. Some things we could do are share fundraisers or become a donation center, right? And this is still meeting survivors, getting survivors what they need, what they wanted, and finding a way to connect with them. And they found that original connection online. Okay, so now we're going to pivot into some tips. But before we do that, we want to have a discussion with you all just to see more about what we learned. So please put your answers and responses in the chat. If our target demographic is elder men over the age of 65, what are some of the things that we might do on our social media if you want to connect with these survivors? What are some things that you might do, consider, some of the things you might talk about? What approaches might you take? How would you navigate trying to connect with them? What might you do on your social media if you want to connect with your target audience who are elder men over 65 years old? I'm not seeing any responses. Maybe people are just typing. That's okay. I'm gonna go ahead and share so we can keep moving. And if you're watching this in the recording, you can feel free to pause and have a discussion about that with those that you're reaching with. Some of the things that we might do are post on Facebook, right? Because we said that this is like the platform that the traditional post-based platform that people might see. We might share sports content and talk and relate that back to sexual violence, and we might post midday. So that leads kind of into our first tip. We really want to invest in our target demographic, what they like. And so to do this, we might have to do some research on what that is. And if we're invested, I can almost guarantee you that it's going to be worth it. We want to utilize what we find about their daily habits, some of their collective past experiences, how they were socialized, their social media use, and what affects to their well-being. What are the effects of their well-being are they concerned about for their general demographic? And let that guide the content that we build for this group. So, for example, things that men over 65 may care about are their routines and comfort, their health, and their legacy, their family, and their friends, right? These are some of the things that we might want to focus on if we're targeting this demographic. And because of the way social media works, you can also find out in real time if they like the content that we're sharing. We also want to be able to think about when they're most likely to be online and to engage. So for example, we know that people do use social media and check social media several times throughout the day, but depending on work, school, and other schedule demands, some time frames work better than others. In the example that we use, we know that many men over 65 are no longer working, and so posting in the middle of the day when they will be awake and active might be helpful. If teens were our demographic, we would suggest posting at a different time because they're more likely to be in school or doing after school activities around midday. Lastly, if we're really invested in our demographic, we should be invested in the way that they communicate, which includes knowing the terms that they use. We also want to make sure that we are able to share information in a way that they will receive it, right? And it's hard for people to intake information when they feel confused, attacked, or not intelligent. Our next tip is understand how different features impact survivors' feeds, right? Understanding our analytics and what the various interactions on social media will do will also help us better understand the algorithms on different platforms. So when we say algorithms, right, we're talking about a way of sorting posts and users' feeds based on relevancy instead of just the published time. Kelly Marie. So Kelly Marie is sharing in the chat some resources that you can use to understand some of the terms that I'm going to be talking about today. I won't have time to discuss in the presentation. So we don't have to necessarily understand the algorithm. That shouldn't be necessarily the focus of our time. But we should understand how likes, shares, saves, comments, and pinning different things can change what survivors see when they interact with our profiles, right? But we should know what each of these things mean on social media. So a like is how we show people that we enjoy what they posted or that we have seen what they posted. So that's what a like is. Sharing is when we have taken something that someone else has posted on social media and we're sharing it broadly. Saving is how we would save something in a book, right? We are cataloging this post so we can come back later and have it within our personal accounts, but we're not posting it widely. Comments are how we can physically say things on other people's profiles or give our input directly on what their shared posts are. And pinning is more of a recent feature, but it is the way that we can, when people first come to our profile, it can be literally almost as same as pinning something in real life. It will be at the top of our profiles for all people to be able to see. Mentioned in hashtags are ways that people can notify us directly that they have shared something to us or about us on social media. Okay. And so Kelly Marie has posted all of those different resources. And so something to keep in mind, right, is like we know that previously showing pictures or faces on Instagram put our posts higher in the algorithm. So we might use a photo of a nature painting in the background of a post that we're sharing when we're talking about survivor needs. So information like this might seem tedious, but better engagement means we're reaching more people and we're reaching more survivors. The next tip is to invest in tools to help us manage content and information. Because there's so much already out there regarding social media, there's some tools that we can use to make content and make information sharing easier. There are a lot of different stock photo collections out there, some paid and some are free. The one that I use a lot and that we use a lot at Iwakasa is Pexels, but we also pay for Adobe stock photos, but Pexels in particular is free. A lot of these stock photo websites have pictures of people of various sizes, speeds, and shapes, and who are navigating different experiences. Link trees are a tool that allows you to create personalized and customizable pages that are all housed together in one place. It can help you share certain information with your audiences, right? So you can have a link to a fundraiser for your community. Then you can have where survivors can find your service hours, and you can have a link to other things all in one place, right? And it doesn't just have to be for your organization. So some things that might be relevant if you all wanted to do a link tree, and link trees are free, is to have a link tree to food banks in your community, other 24-hour services, and link your own agency's website or contact information. Another tool that we've even used to prep this webinar for today are graphic template creators. So Canva is a popular one that we use. They do have a free version, but also Adobe Express is one that you can use if you want to pay for that service. We also suggest using content planners. So trying to remember what you post and when to post it can be hard. But a lot of these tools and online tools, including Canva, have built-in content planners where you can make your content and then schedule when it should go out or be posted publicly. You all already hopefully attended Ari and Keisha's webinar yesterday about QR codes, but these are codes that you can use to point your cameras at, and then it will take you to some other link or website. Paid advertising is also something that you could invest in, possibly if you want your post to go farther, but not necessarily something we encourage if you have paid advertising isn't something we necessarily encourage unless that's something that you're really trying to push right now is building your brand in that way online. Other than that, a lot of these tools are free and you can access them and use them, and they should still do the work of connecting with survivors in your community. Our next tool is to pay attention to viral trends. We also want to encourage you all to do your research, right? So participate. What's happening, know what's happening in the world and be invested in it. And before we participate in a dance trend, right, that has a sound that we don't know the origin of, we want to make sure that we do our resources, right? Before we join in and do something viral, right, or do something that we see other people doing online, people can answer the following question. Who started this trend? What were they referencing, or why did it become popular? How is this trend relevant to the needs of sexual violence survivors in our community? So yes, we want to be relevant, we want to be interactive, and we want to be engaging, but we want to make sure that we're doing so in a way that's not going to cause harm to other survivors. And then our last tip is to have policies and procedures in place established before we post on social media. So oftentimes we see people start to adopt policies after something has happened or they made some type of mistake or error on social media. And while that is a learning lesson, we take the time to establish those policies beforehand, can avoid some of the pain and strife and additional trauma that might happen if we think about it beforehand and before we even do that first post. And so the last section that we're going to cover today is all going to be about some potential policies and procedures to adapt for connecting with survivors on social media. Okay. So I just want to check in to see if Keisha was able to hop back on.
I am here through my phone.
Okay, great. All right.
But I can't see a lot of things. So it's a little different, but I'm here.
Okay, sounds good. As long as we can hear you, I think we're going to be okay. All right. So this is probably the part that you all came to the webinar for to talk about this. I want to highlight that is the most important. We're going to have the most engaging, most dynamic, most insert words that make you feel good post available and out for survivors. But if we're not using our social media in a way that is safe, in a way that is informative, in a way that understands the risk, then we are doing more harm than good to survivors. So here are our focus areas that we're going to talk about when we're doing policies and procedures for connecting with survivors. We're going to focus on management and skill, building our brand and defining our interactions, and how we actually the work responding to survivors. Well, having all these policies is great, and if we have them written down, amazing. but they're not going to be helpful if they're just gathering dust. We want to make sure that the time that we spend developing these policies is balanced with the instruction and direction needed to understand the policy and know what to do in response to the policy. So one of the things that we want to consider is who is going to be responsible for running the account. So social media is different than other forms of media, and we might not just want to hand this to our comms person if we have one, because the time and space between publishing the content and getting feedback is much shorter than many of the other types. Now, in large corporations, right, and for-profit companies, sometimes it's people's full-time jobs to manage this organization's social media account, right? And not even talking about creating content, just to respond to comments, likes, shares, and to monitor the analytics. We probably can't dedicate a whole person to that at our organizations, right? But I want us to understand that this isn't just fun, right? Managing social media accounts takes time and takes intentional effort. People selected to do so for our organizations should be trained in sexual violence advocacy. And they should also be someone who is skilled, knowledgeable, and is willing to put in the time to manage our accounts as well. It will be tasked with possibly managing the account, creating content, and responding to survivors, but this commitment should not be underestimated. I also just want to state for the record that social media should not be defaulted to the part of the job of the youngest person in your organization, or the person who takes pride in their personal social media. If someone's going to do it, they need to do it well, and that means helping them get the professional development they need to improve their skills. Our first procedural piece for this is to have a team, or in our suggestion, is to have a team of 2 or 3 people, depending on how large your organization is and how active you want to be on social media, as well as how many accounts you want to manage, dedicated to managing your social media. Even better, if one of those people has decision-making power in our organizations. And we suggest this for 3 reasons, or for a couple of reasons, sorry. First, it helps to spread the load of creating content, monitoring the account, responding to survivors who could be sharing traumatizing information. If we're constantly doing that, we're going to find that we might dread managing the account. And that's not something that we want to feel when interacting with survivors. Next, it can help decrease the response time needed and managing the ever-evolving stream of posts and interactions. It can also give the people managing it a thought partner in making judgment calls on what's good to post, what's good to share, what we need to be monitoring in terms of social media, what to revise, and what needs to be taken down. This can also help broaden our content output and, again, lessen the load for individuals and offer relief when it's needed in responding on social media. Lastly, this can help safeguard the personal information of the people who share with us if we limit the amount of access to our social media, right? So everyone has access to our social media in our organization. That's not really securing survivors' information because they could be sharing in our personal messages, on our comments. And so we just want to be aware of that. And we'll talk a bit later, but we know we can't control what people originally say in our comments, but when it comes to our personal messages, we have an ethical responsibility to secure that information. And so if we have a limited amount of people who are managing accounts, that's how we can help do that. Having a couple of people manage our social media is also a form of quality assurance too, because if someone else is regularly monitoring what's being done on behalf of our organization and our profiles, then that helps us to make sure that it is being done well. So to that point, here are some questions to consider when pulling together our team. Who on the team is skilled in social media, and do they have capacity to run it? How do they plan to integrate social media into our larger outreach strategy? So remember, everything that's done on our social media be done in tandem with our other outreach and as a part of our larger strategic plan. Have they been trained on how to respond to survivors or managing the social media organization? What do they need to know? What do their supervisors need to know to support them in this task? We're going to talk a little bit more about the potential procedures you can adopt in a little bit. I want to focus on the last piece right now. This is something that we really want to focus on because we know that sometimes people don't understand why outreach is so important or why it might feel time consuming and why it doesn't look like the other work that we might do when we're providing services. It's really important that those supervising people doing the social media understand that time commitment and what that work will look like. Isha, as someone in a supervisor role, is there something you want to add right here?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing too is remember, like we see things day in and day out, right, as advocates. So always remember to take care of your people because I think there's this added pressure to the people managing our social media that they will be available 24/7. And if that's not our standard and our policy day in and day out, don't add that to someone's job description. But you do need to figure out, okay, what is our after hours response? And checking in with that person, like, okay, you're managing the social media, and different platforms require different things. So Facebook, you have to connect it to your personal Facebook account. And so one of the manager, I currently have our Iowa Casa Facebook, so I can see kind of that what's going on. But I know KM really manages that. And so I need to do the job of checking in with her, which is something I haven't been doing. Like we're all in transition as well. Like there's just so much going on. So be very intentional about what your person managing your social media is taking in, right? They are constantly being exposed to things. And then there's like the trolls and like we've got people who reach out to say like, I feel like causing harm. What is your response to that? What are our materials? How do we set ourselves up for success, especially if we haven't intentionally hired a person to do this work and we're having multiple, like I agree with multiple people being engaged in managing our social media because it gives you different perspective, but also like Lachey was saying, it spreads that load. But we all should be able to give the same messaging regardless of who caught the information coming in from the survivor or the person who wants to cause harm. Like what is our response? What are our go-to resources? Also doing some professional development for yourself. Like you don't have to know the ins and outs of what this is, but it's like, oh, link trees. I'm like, oh, I never thought about link tree for Iowa Casa. Is that something we need to think through? Like just sitting in this space and like doing this training is like, what do I need to know so I can even engage in conversation with our social media staff and hear from them. Be very open-minded. Like this is going to feel a little different if like social media is not your thing, and that's okay. Just get that like professional development for yourself so you can just have a base knowledge. You don't need to know the ins and outs of it, but really try to understand it. So as you're doing the visioning for the organization or you're supervising whatever level you fall in, you have an idea of how to put it all together. We do not want to keep working in silos. And I feel like social media has the potential to end up being a siloed position. But your job as that supervisor or that director is to really pull it all together. Like, oh, I got this little piece here. I got this piece here. How do I pull this together? And really just be intentional and consistent and be okay with saying like, oh, we need to pause for a minute, like under construction, or we'll be back, or we're only posting supportive messages for the next month because right now we're in our own turmoil trying to just survive. So all we're saying is we hear you, we see you, here's your support, here's how we can help. So just be intentional when you're in that space, and it's okay to pull back. And that's what this training is about. Like if we decided we wanted to do TikTok and that just became too much, all right, we're going to take it back and we're going to become a YouTube agency. We're posting long videos and we're doing that once a week because that's the capacity. And the other thing I would say is be fluid. Be fluid. Things change. Like there's going to be stuff you have to post quickly, but be okay with pausing in that too, because it's just like constantly rush, go, go, go. Take a minute, take the breath, take the pause. Like, what is the intent? What happens if I post this? What could be the fallback? And talk through that with the people who are managing your social media. Like,
trust them to do the job, right? But also be engaged enough to be like, ooh, that last post, we got a lot of activity, but it didn't seem to be good. Like, where do you think we went wrong? Like, being aware of it enough to have those conversations and course correct when necessary. So I think it's a great opportunity and responsibility we have with social media. And so being the supervisor of that, or the ED of that, like, just take some time to sit with it, especially if this is new to you and it's uncomfortable. Be intentional, learn the things that you need to learn, and like really take the feedback and trust those. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was
Oh, I thought.
no, you were doing amazing. I was not trying to stop you in any way.
No,
Thank you so much, Keisha, for that.
Mhm.
I'm gonna, unfortunately, everyone, I want to make sure that you get out on time. We respect your time. We might go a little bit over, so you give me 5 minutes. If you can't, I understand. It will be recorded and posted later, but just stick with us. So the next thing we want to focus on is building our brand and deciding on our interactions. We really want to think about what is acceptable behavior on our social media accounts and what we want our online persona to be. When we're talking about acceptable behavior, I might personally feel like it's acceptable behavior to go back and forth with someone in the comments on my personal social media account. Keisha, on the other hand, might say, I would never, ever do that. Instead, I would just block them. Even though we're experiencing the same thing, we will still have different assumptions about what is appropriate behavior and what we should be promoting on our social media accounts. With that, it's important to have these conversations at our organizations about what are we going to do when X happens? What is appropriate for us to do? Should we be doing and sharing comments at all? Should we have all comments turned off on our posts? That's always an option for organizations to consider, right? When we're thinking about our online persona, we want to answer the question, what do we want people to feel when they are engaging with our content? When they think of Iwacasa's brand and who we are online, what do we want them to be? I think for Iwacasa, we want it to be informative, responsive, and seen as leaders and coalition builders. We're the coalition, right? That makes sense. But that's going to look different for every organization. When you're deciding on your interactions, you want to consider what kind of content do survivors want to interact with, and how do we incorporate that into our goals and make it part of that persona that we talked about? When people think about us, how do we connect how people view us with what they need? What are we posting? And how do we decide what to post? Right? So again, I might personally think we need to respond to this right now. This is really important. And Keisha might have the perspective of, whoa, the situation is still evolving. We need to wait a minute and figure out what to do, but we can respond tomorrow, right? And who gets to make decisions about that? What kind of interactions do we do on social media? So we talked about that there is like, share, save. You can live stream, you can not. What are we doing on social media and what do we have the capacity to manage, right? With liking something, that can be seen as supporting what was shared, right? Even if we're just wanting to say, I hear you and see you, it might not be appropriate to like. But that's the decision we have to come to as those who are managing the social media and those who are managing our organizations. Who do we interact with and how? So if you are a small organization, our suggestion is to keep it to other community organizations and not following individual accounts, right? We don't want to accidentally reveal that a survivor is interacting with us by following their personal accounts. Instead, if we keep it on organizations, then we keep it more anonymous and on that professional level. Okay, I really wish we had time to focus on this question today, but just kind of think about it in your head, how you would respond. If someone said this to you in your personal messages, right? I'm not sure who's reading this, but when I was younger, I was sexually abused by my grandma. I didn't tell someone, I need help. I don't want to deal with this anymore, right? This is something they sent you in your personal or private messages on your social media platform. Our response would be, my name is Liz Shea, and I'm an advocate at the SVCC, right? The Sexual Violence Community Center. Thanks for reaching out, and I'm so sorry you're going through this. I want to try to help, but I think it would be better if I was able to call you on my cell phone. Is that okay? We can also text if you don't feel comfortable calling. So there are so many reasons I chose the response I did, and I'll try to explain all of them in the very, very, very short amount of time we have left together. But what's important to know that for responding on our helpline, our responses when we're responding on social media should be in line with how we respond on our helpline. So what we suggest is that you have a policy at your organization about, just like we have policies about doing mobile advocacy and guidance on that, we should have one about how to do virtual advocacy, right? If we were doing advocacy during COVID, we had to think about very quickly, how do we convert everything that we were doing in person to virtual? And social media is a part of that. Well, it's better if we can back that up with a policy. What we need to know for those responding and managing our social media is what to do if a survivor is seeking out help in different situations. These advocates who are managing social media need to be skilled at de-escalating and grounding themselves, right? So this might be outright uncomfortable. Survivors might be angry, they might be confused, they might be actively navigating a crisis. And our focus while we're providing services should be, how can I help this survivor, and not how can I stop this interaction? The framing around that is different. And so if those are our mindsets, they will bring forth different results. And we're not saying that advocates should endure abuse while responding to survivors who are seeking help. That is not what we're saying at all. What we want is for advocates to understand the difference between what is uncomfortable and what is harmful, right? And have guidance on that provided by their organization. Okay, everyone. So I know it is over. If you have to go, please go. Like I said, this will be recorded, and I will try to finish this up quickly so we're not too far over your time. If you have questions, go ahead and start putting them in the Q&A box, and I will make sure to follow up with them over email. So here's some questions that we want to think about when responding to survivors. What are the expectations on social media for responding? So someone mentioned, what if someone, in the Mentimeter earlier, what if someone requests support for help on the weekends, right, where we're not actively monitoring it? This is something that we might want to post on our public profile, like our responses for, if you request for help on social media, our accounts are only active from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Someone will get in contact with you with the next business day. If you are still seeking help, please contact our helpline, right? That way we are letting survivors know what to expect, holding ourselves to a standard, and making sure that it's clear and lowering the discrepancies that can happen between that response, and as well as helping them find another place to actively find support. Which requests for support do we respond to? Public and or private, and how do we respond? And what are the expectations of our response time for social media? So like Keisha was talking about a little bit earlier, sometimes there's pressure to respond right away because of how quickly things evolve on social media. But if that is not our expectation for people who are responding on the helpline or people who are responding on our text lines, it also should not be our expectation to those who are responding on social media. Those should all be about the same, because we know to give thoughtful and intentional support, we might need time to think, and even more importantly, we need time to listen. So someone has requested support on your public profile. That is very different than someone requesting support on your private messages. We have a couple of things to consider. What would you say if someone said, this is what we might say if someone did this? Jamie commented on our agency social media, I need help, I was raped. We might, one, think about the amount of information that's shared publicly on our account. So we never, ever want to stop survivors from being able to share their stories. And we don't want this information to be weaponized against them, and we also don't want to re-traumatize someone. So what we might do is make sure that first we're offering that support. We might say back to them in the comments, hi, Jamie, I'm sorry this happened to you. I'd like to try to help. I sent you a personal message. This way, we're demonstrating that we want to help. We're validating their experience, and we're also being clear that we're not going to continue to have this conversation in public, right? After we're able to, if they are able to then respond to you in their private messages, then you can let them know, hi, our policy is XYZ. We're going to have to take your post down, but we wanted to let you know why it's happening. If they're not, you need to develop a protocol for what to happen if someone is not responding to you this way and continues to post these messages. We want to make sure that someone else is always brought in about what's happening. We want to continue to monitor the situation. We know we can't come up with scenarios for everything that happens, but having some plans in place is a good place to start. Okay, everyone. Next question is to respond to survive. Here's some other questions that you consider to respond to survivors. I'm not going to read them because we're already over, but here are things that you can consider, and you all will get a copy of the slides. All right. Most important thing that we want you all to know is what to do when responding to survivors. And again, these are our suggestions. Make sure that you're introducing yourself with your name, letting them know that you're there to support, and letting them know about your confidentiality policies, right? So, hi, my name is Lachey. I want to let you know that everything that we talk about is confidential. However, our suggestion is, 1, to call our helpline, or 2, we can keep talking about things here, but I do want to let you know that someone else manages our social media account and they might see what you share, right? Being upfront, but also being informative and still offering that support. And then the next one is to make sure that survivors know what's going to happen while they're interacting with you and after, and making sure you're documenting what is going on. When in our documentation, we don't want to describe, and then the survivor said this, that, and the third, we want to say, someone reached out for social media for support. This is what we did, and this is the follow-up we provided. Okay. There are some resources, and again, we will give you all a copy of these slides so you can see them. And we want to just remind you all that social media is not about exploitation of technology, but again, helping people find that connection. With that, I'm so sorry that we ran over time at the end. And thank you for those of you who stuck with me. Are there any questions? Yes, we will definitely send you out the list of questions if you registered for the presentation today. Absolutely, you will have them.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. Sorry about the tech issues on my end. Super excited to sit with you or be with you if you need us to support you as you navigate being intentional about your social media as well.
Thank you all so much, and we appreciate you. Thanks for coming.